The next section we're going to do deals with measurements and units. This section is very important in terms of conversions, using the imperial and metric system. Some of you may be very familiar with the imperial system, some of you with the metric, but it's very important to be well versed in both so that if somebody is referring to something in feet, you know what they mean in terms of meters or so forth. So if we look here, looking first at the imperial system and what each of them, how they're broken down. There are 12 inches in a foot, 3 feet in a yard, 5,280 feet in a mile, 16 ounces in a pound, 2,000 pounds in a ton, 16 fluid ounces in a pint, 2 pints to a quart, and 4 quarts to a gallon. Dealing with time, we have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, 52 weeks in a year, 12 months in a year, and 365 days also in a year. Fortunately, this system right here in terms of time is independent of imperial metric. Everybody uses the same measure of time. So that's one nice thing. Let's look at some conversions, some problems using converting smaller units to larger and vice versa. We have 36 inches. One thing I would recommend you to do is, if you haven't already, is to pause the tape and go back and look at that chart if you're not familiar with it and write it down. There are going to be several charts that I'm going to be showing you, and write down those actual measurements because they will definitely help you when referring to these problems and more to beyond. So you can take the time to do that. 36 inches is how many feet? Well, if you refer to your chart, it is 3 feet is a yard. That one doesn't apply though. And there are 5,280 feet in a mile. That one here doesn't apply either. What you need to do is, what do we have and what are we looking for? In this particular case, we're converting from inches to feet. So you need to refer to the portion of the list that deals with inches and feet. There are 12 inches in 1 foot. So therefore, if there are 36 inches, that'll be 3 feet. Yards and feet. We know that for every 1 yard, there are 3 feet. So I take this number 7, multiply it by 3 to give me 7 yards, which equals 21 feet. We have weeks to days. There are 7 days for every 1 week. So I take 3, multiply by 7 to give me 3 weeks, which would be equivalent of 21 days. Here I'm converting inches to feet again. 12 inches per foot. 12 divides into 72 6 times. So 72 inches is the equivalent of 6 feet. Here I have converting pints to quarts. There are 2 pints for every 1 quart. So if there are 8 pints, 2 divides evenly into 8 4 times. So 8 pints is the equivalent of 4 quarts. Now we have gallons and pints. Now this one you have to take 2 steps to do. Be careful here. If you look back at your chart, you see that there are 2 pints for every quart and 4 quarts for every gallon. So that means there are 8 pints, actually just above here, there are 8 pints for every 1 gallon. So then we say, all right, 8 pints equals 1 gallon. Well, 10 gallons, we would then take and multiply this number by 10, and you end up with 80 pints. So sometimes when you're doing conversions, you have to be careful. Sometimes you're going from a smaller unit to a larger one, the number will go down. When going from a larger unit to a smaller one, the number will go up. That's always a rule of thumb. So if I'm starting with a, let's look at days. If I'm converting from days to weeks, the number is going to go down because a day is shorter than a week is. 21 days is 3 weeks. So if I were to be converting this way, if I go from pints to quarts, pints are smaller than quarts, so the number is actually going to go down. So be careful with that. Next, we're going to look at the metric system. And the metric system is more proportional than the imperial system is, because all of them are mainly related to the meter and the gram and the liter. We look here first. A millimeter is 1/1000th of a meter. A centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. A meter obviously equals 1 meter. Notice that the abbreviation for meter is M and the abbreviation for mile is MI. Don't get those confused either. A kilometer is 1,000 meters. Then we'll go on to grams. A milligram, just like a millimeter, is 1/1000th of a gram. A gram equals a gram. Now we have a kilogram is 1,000 grams. Milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter. So notice consistently here, milli always is smaller, and kilo, the prefix kilo, is a larger number. So let's look at some conversions here for grams. We have 3,100 milligrams is equal to how many grams? Well, we know that there are 1,000 milligrams for every 1 gram. So when you're dividing by 1,000, you move the decimal 3 places. 1, 2, 3, or 3.1 grams. Going from a small unit to a larger unit, the number got smaller. Now we have 2,500 centimeters is the equivalent of how many meters? Well, we know that there are 100 centimeters for every 1 meter. When dividing by 100, you move it 2 places. 25 meters. Going from a smaller measure to a larger measure, the number goes down. Here we have 5 million millimeters and converting that to kilometers. We are going from a smaller measure to a larger measure. And I'm going to show you this conversion on the board here. 5 million millimeters. There are, for every 1 meter, there are 1,000 millimeters. This is an equivalent number. 1 meter is equivalent to 1,000 millimeters. And 1 kilometer is the equivalent of 1,000 meters. Now this is called conversions. You're converting from millimeters to kilometers. So what I then do is multiply, this number is understood over 1, multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. Notice, because millimeter is in the numerator, those will cancel. 1 in the numerator, 1 in the denominator, those will cancel. These meters will cancel, and I'm only left with kilometers, which is exactly what I want to have. If I were to do the math, I end up with 5 million divided by 1,000 times 1,000, which is 1 million. And 5 million divided by 1 million is 5. So for every 5 million millimeters, there are 5 kilometers. So you can see here that millimeters are very small measures. Next, we're going to look at some metric to U.S. conversions. We have, for every 2.5 centimeters, this is definitely another chart that you want to write down, because this is something that you may deal with from time to time if you ever have to go in the States, or vice versa if you have to ever go into Canada. For every 2.5 centimeters, that's the equivalent of 1 inch. Now this is metric system on one side sometimes, the other time, so it goes back and forth. So 2.5 centimeters is 1 inch. 30 centimeters is the equivalent of 1 foot. 39 inches is the equivalent of 1 meter. 3.3 feet is also the equivalent of 1 meter. 39 inches is 3.3 feet, by the way, so they are consistent. 3,300 feet is the equivalent of 1 kilometer. 1,600 meters is the equivalent of 1 mile. 1.6 kilometers is the equivalent of 1 mile. Now get into measurement, into weight. 28 grams is the equivalent of 1 ounce. 450 grams is the equivalent of 1 pound. 2.2 pounds is the equivalent of 1 kilogram. 910 kilograms is the equivalent of 1 ton. Next we have in liquid measure, we have 470 milliliters is the equivalent of 1 pint. 2.2 pints is the equivalent of 1 liter. 1.1 quarts is the equivalent of 1 liter. 3.8 liters is the equivalent of 1 gallon, which we will use in a few minutes in showing you a cost of gasoline. And 260 gallons is the equivalent of 1 kiloliter. Along with the conversions, we are going to do a real-life problem using gasoline prices, comparing them in the U.S. and in Canada. There was a morning that I compared the prices, and in Canada, the prices were 81 cents a liter. That same morning, they were $2.04 a gallon in the U.S. Now, if you don't know the conversions, that doesn't mean a lot to you. So looking here, I already have figured it out for you. That 81 cents a liter is the equivalent of $3.07 a gallon. And that $2.04 a gallon is the equivalent of 53 cents a liter. As you can see there, it's a considerable savings when you convert the two. What I wondered was, would it be cheaper for you to buy gas in the States or in Canada? So assuming that this particular day, of course, things change, prices adjust. But assuming this particular day, the exchange rate at the time was 15%. So this particular price is, if you were to buy 20 gallons of gas, would it save you money? So let's look to see. Using U.S. prices per gallon, here's what it looks like. If we were to buy 20 gallons of gas at $2.04, what the gas was this particular morning, by 20 gallons, that's $40.80 U.S., which is the equivalent of $46.92 Canadian. So just under $50 it costs to fill your tank if you were to cross over into the States. Using the gas prices that particular morning in Canada, it was the equivalent of $3.07 per gallon in the States. Buying that same $20 worth of gas, or 20 gallons, of gas, it was $61.40 U.S. Canadian was $70.61. So you can see here, was it worth your while to actually purchase gas in the States? And the answer is yes. How much did you save? $23.69. So almost $25 savings on 20 gallons of gas on this particular day. Pretty amazing. Continuing with our conversions from imperial to metric and metric to imperial, I thought it would be interesting to look at some common measurements to see how we can convert them. We're going to convert 5 ounces to grams. So the conversion rate here is for every 28 grams, there's an ounce. So we put grams on the top and ounces on the bottom. The rule of thumb is when using conversions, when you refer to your chart, whatever you're wanting to convert into, you put that in the numerator. That has to be left over. And what you want to cancel out is going to end up in the denominator. So remember that. So 5 ounces times 28 over grams, over ounces, 28 grams over ounces. The ounces will cancel, and 28 times 5 is 140 grams. So every 5 ounces, you end up with 140 grams. Now let's look at gallons to liters. 5 gallons of milk, gas, whatever you want to look at. The conversion here, 5 gallons, is 3.8 liters for every 1 gallon. We want to end up with liters. That's in the numerator. We want to get rid of gallons, denominator. The gallons go away, and we end up with 3.8 times 5, which ends up being 19 liters. So 5 gallons is the equivalent of 19 liters. 100 kilometers per hour converted to miles per hour. We have 100 kilometers per hour. we want to end up with miles per hour, and there are for every 1 mile, there are 1.6 kilometers. Hours I want to keep, so I don't need to cancel that out. Kilometers cancel here, multiply, and I get 100 miles for every 1.16 hours. Well, I needed to divide that out, and 100 divided by 1.6 is 62.5 miles per hour. So the 100 kilometers per hour is the equivalent to 62.5 miles per hour, approximately 63 miles per hour. 165 pounds. How much does that measure in kilos? I don't know where I got that measurement of weight. You can probably figure it out. 165 pounds, if I were to know how much does a particular instructor weigh in kilos, for every 1 kilo, there is 2.2 pounds. I want the pounds to cancel, and I want to keep the kilos. I end up with 165 kilograms for every 2.2. So I divide 165 by 2.2, and I end up with 75 kilograms. Last one we have is $900 Canadian is equal to how much? The equivalent of what in US? The conversion rate at this present moment is 0.85. So I'm going to take 900, multiply it by 0.85. When you multiply that, you end up with $765 US. 900 Canadian dollars is the equivalent of $765 US. There will be times that you need to convert measurements from metric to imperial or vice versa. Hopefully these charts, and even converting within both systems, the metric system and in the imperial system, keep these charts, keep your notes for these charts. They will be very helpful in the future.